Hello Wizrobes, and welcome to another episode of Wizards Weekend Review. I'm your host, Wizard Black Mage, and today we're going to discuss the game Dungeons & Dragons: Eye of the Beholder. Before we get into it, I know that it's been more than a little while since my last video. Yep, so, with that out of the way, let's dive in. I woke up the other day from a D&D related dream, and I really wanted to experience some Dungeons & Dragons. Unfortunately, that would mean waiting until my group's next session, and I just could not have that. This is when I remembered that I had a game for the Game Boy Advance that contained the words Dungeons and Dragons on the cart. So I popped that bad boy in my Retron 5 and got right in. I thought it'd be a good idea to try to recreate some of the characters that I've been playing in my real-life sessions, and then promptly team-wiped. I was not recording during my hour or two of playing yesterday because I was not planning on making this video at the time, but after only an hour of play, I had some pretty big opinions on the game. Before I get too ahead of myself, I am aware that this is a recreation of a port of a PC game. I reached out to my other D&D friends asking if any of them had played this version of the game to help me with some of the nuances, but they had not. I did find out that my Dungeon Master has played the games in the series, and I'm assuming on the PC because he said games, plural, and from my research, the sequels were never ported to the Super Nintendo. He has fond memories of these titles. I may look into playing these in the future, but for this video, I'm only going to be looking at the GBA title. And I'm going to try to be as fair as I can, knowing that this is a recreation on the Game Boy Advance. The game uses an older version of D&D that I'm not used to. I currently play on 5th edition and believe this runs in 2nd edition rules, so I'm not quite sure what I'm doing, as the developers assumed you would be well versed in Dungeons & Dragons to be interested in playing this game. Even after doing a little more research between my first attempt playing and recording this video, I do not find that this game is very intuitive, and I do not have plans on completing the game anytime soon. This video, more or less, will just be me spitting out what yesterday was several hours of what I did not like about this game. By the way, I am going to do my best to explain concepts for both the game and legit Dungeons & Dragons. If you have a basic understanding of D&D, you may have a better time with this video. Please, if I lose you, or if you have more understanding than I do and I seem lost to you, leave me a comment. Ask me questions or give me more understanding. And if you love this game, I'm not trying to bash on something you love, but give you my perspective. I'm happy to get your perspective as well. The game starts out with what I honestly consider some pretty decent art for the GBA. They give us some plot, a reason to be in the dungeon. The sewers are filled with monsters. One monster is really not great. A beholder named Xanathar. Hey wait, I know him. He made the guide to everything. I am now very conflicted, because without him, my half-barbarian zealot, half-grave cleric, half-orc would not exist. My team for this play attempt were my two actual characters, Thamior and Krunk, along with Bibborp and Wizard. In my current campaign, Thamior, who died at the bottom of the ocean trying to find his boyfriend's corpse, was a half-elf ranger. I was not expecting to have the exact same character build for him by any means. This is the same case for my currently alive character, Professor Krunk, who is a barbarian and a cleric, as previously mentioned. Unfortunately, even the most basic part of those characters is not possible in this game, as you only have cleric, wizard, rogue, and fighter as class options. This is fairly disappointing, but I can move past this. Though, if the devs really thought I would already be a player of the real game, I am not sure why they would not want me to be able to put my character in the game. Maybe 2nd edition did not have barbarians or rangers? I do not know. So Thamior became a rogue, and Krunk became a fighter. As a note, now that I've created characters a few times, I realize that the roll character stats is actually rolling each stat individually, but all at once. So you could technically spam this to have all the stats be high. I did not really do this because I was only looking for a specific stat, but I think that is the strategy to make a character in this game. This is one of the first things I would fix if I were making a game like this. Personally, I prefer the buy-point system. If you're not familiar with how buy-point systems work, you basically have a pool of points and can divide them up amongst your different stats. But the more you increase the stat, the more points it costs to increase them. If I have a specific character build in mind, I can push to the stats that will make that build work. The most frustrating part of creating a character back in the day was that I would spend all this time workshopping a character only to have bad dice rolls day one affect me the rest of that campaign. I think this is one of the reasons I had a hard time getting into the base game when I was younger, so a buy-point system would be the way I would personally go if I was making this game today. After you roll stats, you choose your first class. The game does allow you to multi-class as you level. I did not get to that point. On the first time leveling, 2 of my party members died forever, so I stopped playing. Each class has some perk. Fighter gets to choose 2 feats instead of 1 at first level. Rogue gets a whole lot of skills. I did not pay attention to what the other 2 classes got as a benefit. I do not know what the feats do by name, so I selected some at random for each character and moved on. This is the second thing I would change if I were to be able to fix this game or were making it myself. Having an option to look at a description of anything would be ideal, because I do not know what most feats do, and selecting them at random is definitely not the ideal strategy. I suppose the other option would be to stop by my closest half-price books and see if they have a copy of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Player Handbook, because the devs assume I am an avid player of this version of the game. You get to select an avatar for your character. They are all hideous, but I might steal this as a bit for Krunk in my current campaign, although the real Krunk has a monocle, so this looks nothing like him. You also get to choose a miniature. This represents your character on the combat screen. I think on the base level this is neat, but there is some improvement that I would want to make to this as well. As you fight monsters, you get loot and gear and can equip this loot and gear, but your mini does not change outfits or weapons. And you look a bit silly shooting arrows from the tip of your sword. I know this is a minor thing to change, but it would be so impactful to the experience. For me, a callback to Alucard having cloak colors, sword lengths and colors, and different shields in the game Symphony of the Night. It's a small detail, but it's a nice touch. I wouldn't even need that much detail. Just switch the thing my mini is holding. Anyway, after 20 minutes of character building, I'm finally in the dungeon. So you have your characters, and you're in the dungeon. The entrance to the sewer collapses behind you. There's only forward from here. You spend some time exploring the dungeon, and if you get lost, the start menu has a map, though the little "you are here" arrow is not quite an arrow, so it is difficult to know where you are facing from the map screen. The very first time I found myself in combat, I could not figure out how to move around the board. I wanted to switch targets, but I could not, and moving my character also did not seem possible. As it turns out, because the board is at a slight tilt for perspective, you have to press 2 directional buttons and move on the diagonal. It has been a while since I played Bill and Ted for the NES, but I believe the maps in that game had the same problem that I'm facing here. It's not very intuitive. In fact, a lot of this game is not. I remember 20 years ago feeling completely lost, not in the dungeon layout, but in the mechanics. The more I play, the more I find hidden in little menus I would otherwise ignore. I accidentally discovered the rest mechanic, which is good, because now I rest after every encounter. 2, maybe 3 hours into the game, I discovered that you can change what spell the spellcasters have prepared, and my first time playing, after clearing all the enemies in the first level of the dungeon, I spent a good 30 minutes wandering around before I discovered the climb skill and moved to the next section of the game. After the hour I played yesterday, I am pretty familiar with this part of the game, and my encounters are feeling a little less one-sided than they did yesterday. When I played off camera, my team fought some kobolds and then went right into the next battle and died one by one. It was pretty gruesome. Your characters turn into bodies on the floor, and enemies go around crushing your remains until you game over. Hey future wizard, remember to recreate this happening for visual effect. There are still things I would like to change, and I think I really should have 2 fighters on the team because I treat Thamur like a fighter even though he's a rogue. I actually made a fighter and I named him Thanior, and I do not think that I like him any better. Because I do not have much more to say and do not fit these thoughts cohesively in the earlier portion of the video, here are my remaining critiques of the game as I experienced in no particular order. I do not know if I will have footage of this happening, but opportunity attacks in combat, I do not understand what triggers them. I walk away from enemies with no opportunity attack. I cast a spell and everyone apparently has the Mage Slayer feat. A really big thing I would like there to be in this game is a visual dice roll. When it comes to combat, characters miss constantly. My characters, enemy characters, miss. Battles seem to go on forever because of this. It would be nice for a little d20 to spin and show a number so that I know why I missed that attack. There are a lot of elements that make Dungeons & Dragons fun that will always get lost in translating to a game like this, but dice rolling does not have to be one of them. When you're exploring the sewers, the walls do not have a lot of variety. I do not know how I would fix this necessarily, but it's easy to get lost simply turning around. You will find yourself checking the map constantly to make sure you are going the right way. I guess this isn't a huge deal, but it was something that bothered me. The group needs a collective inventory. As I'm writing this, I'm wondering if you can swap characters to take items from the loot screen. You know, I'm gonna try this and I will be right back. Okay, yeah, so you can swap between characters and option screens, including the loot screen. Knowing this is nice because it was a pain to give all of my items to Thanior, and then have to trade the items from Thanior's inventory into each party member that it made more sense to go to. Action button also talks to people. What does that mean? All I wrote down is action button also talks to people. Oh, it doesn't do that. There's an interact button, but you cannot use that same button to talk to NPCs. For a minute, I thought you simply just did not interact with them. But you actually can interact with them, but the talk button is in the character screens. I guess this makes sense as you can choose which character is talking to the NPC this way, but I really wish there was a better way for this to happen. And with my discovery from the previous thought I just had, you can actually change who is speaking in the Talk to NPCs menu, so I do not know why the action button does not automatically start the conversation. It's crazy, the more I play this game, the more I think I would have done this differently, but I think the devs probably did do the best they could with the limitations that they had. I do not know what the development of this game looked like, but it seems they did their best to implement systems people who were already familiar with D&D would understand and go with. The issue I have is that it's been a good 20 years, and the version of D&D is no longer played, so I am not familiar with the systems they are hoping I already will be familiar with. Also, if I had not played D&D a day in my life, this would not be the way to start playing or get familiar with how to play in any sort of way. I think this is what I'm really wanting out of this game. I want to make educated decisions when making a character, not to do things at random. I do not want to need to have an actual D&D book to play your video game version of D&D, and some very minor quality of life changes just to make the game feel more thought out. I just cannot get over Thamior throwing an arrow from his sword. It's absolutely wild. A lot of this criticizing got me wanting to check out how difficult it would be to make the game from the ground up and implement my changes to it. I have been watching a lot of videos here on YouTube of people making their games on the Unity engine. I'm considering looking into this, but like this YouTube channel, it may just be one of those ideas that sounds fun on paper, but then I either never get invested, or I get so invested that I burn myself out. I keep thinking of the logistical nightmare it would be to try to make a game that is closer to the D&D experience that I'm used to without getting a lawsuit from Wizards of the Coast on my hands. With all these thoughts out there, I really do not hate the game. Every time I am upset about not being able to do something, after a few minutes of looking through menus, I usually find that I am able to do that thing. The problem is, this should not be the case. Maybe if they had a more traditional pause screen, like you get with the Mega Man series, and all the options for what to do outside of combat were on this screen, I would be happier. I do not know, but if you've made it here to the end of this video, I'm assuming that you've played this game, or the Super Nintendo port, or the originals on PC. If you have, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I probably will try to finish the game at some point, despite having said that I wasn't going to at the beginning of this video. If you would like to see me try to stream this on Twitch, I do stream there sometimes. Anyway, I really appreciate you stopping in and taking the time to listen to me ramble about this game. I've been Wizard Black Mage, this has been Wizard Black Gaming, and I will see you around on my next Weekend Review.